excuse me, David, so does that mean by inference that we still have the 4.2 minus 1.6 left in bank cap for the next couple of years?
Correct. So we'll have $2.6 million
right.
when we begin next year to work on the 2021, 2022 budget.
Okay.
Property rateables. So this is an important number for determining how much the tax impact is going to be on the taxpayers. Rateables have gone up every year since the economy had that big downturn in 08-09, the housing crisis. A couple of years ago, the township began a 5-year revaluation schedule. So they take about 20% of the town and they revalue the properties every year just to make sure that they have an accurate assessment of the value of properties throughout the town. In 2020, the rateables, which is the total value of all the properties in town, it's not just homes, it's commercial property, industrial property, etc. In Piscataway, it increased $313 million. It went from $7.5 billion to $7.8 billion. That's an important number, not just for the impact on individual homeowners or the local property tax, but the value of that property is actually used in the state aid distribution formula, which is a separate conversation for another day, but it is an important number. In 2020, the increase was actually primarily, 54% of it was due to homeowners, residential properties, and 28% of it were apartments, which tend to be large organizations that own these apartments with individual people living in them. But there wasn't a lot of industrial and commercial growth in the rateables in 2020. It was mostly homeowners. And what that means is that skews how the property tax increase gets apportioned. If the value of the properties went up more so with homeowners, then the increase in property taxes will skew a little bit more towards the homeowners in general.
So what drives our budget? So state and federal mandates, and what that means, one of the major ones that came out 5 years ago, and I talk about 5 years ago because it still impacts us today, is the state said they were going to do all of the standardized testing that they do, park testing and JSLA, they're going to do it online. And you're on your own to figure out, you have 2 years to figure out how to fund and buy your own computers so you can test your 2,000 high school kids. So that's a state and federal mandate, right? So that's a perfect example of how much money we would need to pour into something if the state comes down and says, you have to do this, but you're not going to get any money for it. Enrollment also drives our budget. Staffing needs, salaries and benefits is what percent salary and benefits of our budget, David?
Roughly
70%. All right, of our entire budget is salaries and benefits our employees, who are our most valuable resource. The NJ student learning standards, right? If we have to make adjustments for any of those or buy materials, things like that, that's all in our budget. The technology, obviously security, and preparation for ELL and special education students. Enrollment projections. Student enrollment has been trending downward across the state, not just in Piscataway. So if you talk to demographers, which we have hired one and worked with, in my town, we have a town of 4 schools. It's a K through 8 district, and one of those schools closed. And theory being, parents are not being able to turn over their homes when their kids go to college. Right? Their kids go to college, they're in more debt, kids come back and live at home instead of selling their homes to a younger family with kids. Right? So our enrollment projections have been going down slightly, but not as much as they would be if we didn't have the apartments to subsidize, and so we're happy about that, right? So our projected enrollment for next year is a little over 7,000 students. And we, again, engaged in a demographer, Ross Haber, who is very intimate and with our township and works well with the county, the town, and gets the numbers he needs to get. So we're happy about that. He's been pretty on target with the numbers he's given us over the years.
Steve, Frank?
Yeah.
Do you feel that Piscataway has enough school facility space in terms of classrooms going forward based on some of these enrollment projections?
We do, and the enrollment projections, if you look at the 12th grade class going in and the 9th grade, the 8th graders going up, and in every transition level that we have, we see a flux in the numbers where it's in our favor as for the building. Okay, it's not, we have enough classrooms, we did the projections, we put the extra classrooms on Grandview. Last year, we finished them up, and they've served us well. But we're able to use them, and we feel very strongly we're in good shape right now.
Dr. Anelli?
Yes.
One other question, and taking a look at
Sure.
demographics specifically and counts, numbers. Today, I just got my U.S. Census form
Yep.
to complete, so I would suspect that comes into play as well, right? Especially since we're in a census year.
Yeah.
Getting.
Right, so when the
supports.
demographer goes to the township, all the township could go on are the numbers that they have, the households, the apartments, things like that. So they put the formulas in, so everything kind of jives with each other, and the formula kind of spits out numbers that we're talking about here.
And they align that with
Correct.
with the current census
Yes.
data, so it's ever important
Yeah, really
to
important.
complete those forms
Absolutely.
and
No
get
question about
our
it.
supports where we need them. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Staffing, so this budget has in it, due to enrollment projections, we expect to reduce multiple K-5 class sections through attrition and staff redistribution, just because we want to stay within those numbers that we talked about and in our K-5s as far as per pupils in the class. Staff additions include a behaviorist at the K-5 level, which we are seeing a need for in all of our levels. Engineering teacher because of our academies, right? Our academies are thriving and we want to make sure we support them in every single way. An ESL teacher at the high school, a grade 4 or 5 special ed resource teacher. We're looking for 2 of them. And what that will help is give the kids who need pull-out support an equal number of minutes that they get English or math instruction. As we sit here now, those classes are 90 minutes, and that pull-out instruction is only 60 because we don't have enough staff members. So this will make those things whole, so they can get the proper minutes of instruction and not have to go back in the classroom after 60 minutes and kind of feel lost. Full-day preschool special ed, and that is partly because of the growth of our grant, but these are district employees, and we're really looking forward to being able to take those half-day classes and make them full-day classes. IT support staff. We all know how important technology is, so we really want to make sure that we are solid in that area. And a district transition mentor coordinator. We have, and you all approved and wonderfully, a director of special projects who's working with me on freshman seminar, the transition programs, the mentoring programs, and we feel very strongly that she needs a teacher coordinator to be able to implement all of the programs and things that we're trying to do. It's really wonderful. We're excited about the freshman seminar program, but it's an entire course that needs to be created. 25 staff members that have a section each. So there's a lot of work there. So this budget has that in there. And some coaches for field hockey and boys and girls soccer, and that allows them to have an assistant varsity coach. And one of the most important aspects of this is when they go to away matches, a lot of times the varsity field hockey is at a different location than the JV field hockey, and to leave them both with one coach, if something happens, is not good, whether it be an injury, something happens. So we wanted to make sure a third coach was in there and flexible to be able to go. Educational initiatives. One we talk about all the time, and it's in our board and strategic goals. Transition programs, mentoring programs, and post-secondary transition. All right, that's our educational initiative. Technology upgrades at all levels, the academy upgrades and the additions to that. We have a 5th academy now, and as we expected, those kids are now going to be juniors and seniors, so we need more resources for them. A continuity of a reading level program, so basically through the years there's been these different reading programs at different levels. Now we want to make sure we have a continuous program K through 5. I know close to a lot of your hearts, materials to address cursive writing and vocabulary, right, which have been abandoned by the Department of Education. Right? Get on your computer and write. My kids can't read. My daughters can't read a cursive, something except to write their name. So, AP textbooks and materials, and fully equip the K-8 musical instruments. They will be able to maintain them annually for a lot less of a price.
Does that make you happy, Zoe?
Right? We need a lot of help there. So, technology-wise, right? We continue our one-to-one iPad project, and it's going extremely well. So we're happy to be able to do that. So some Mac desktops are in requests from teachers because they're going to be in some classes that need a more robust program to run their curriculum. New iPads for middle school teachers, they haven't had them since we began the program 7 years ago, so they need new ones. Replace old desktops with laptops, additional projectors, just the normal upgrading stuff that we need to do to make ourselves, again, when we put these projectors in, the ones we initially did 3 years ago will be out of style there, so we want to try to keep up as best we can. And turn it over to Mr. Oliver.
Capital projects. Over the last 5.5 years, the district has done a lot of capital projects, and it's ongoing now. If you go by the high school, you see the work we're doing to put in new bleachers, which will help with ADA compliance and some safety issues, along with some new energy-efficient LED lighting. So the district has really been committed to gradually using the budget to try and save funds to be able to get some capital projects done, and we're trying to continue that next year. Some of the items that we have planned, and we're in various stages of development at the moment, renovations for the high school and the 3 middle school auditoriums. I just had a meeting this week, which is kind of the final design meeting as we head towards getting a bid document on the street to get some work done on our auditoriums. The family consumer science and life skills room remodels as well. Those are up at the high school. For those of you, probably my generation and older, family consumer science is home ec. So that's the home ec classroom. But
Ours is probably original to the building.
But modern name is family consumer science.
Probably avocado in color.
There is some avocado.
Yeah.
That's it.
We're remodeling that room. We think it'll be nice for the classes. Both of those classrooms will be a significant upgrade. A few of the other things we're looking at various planning stages for next year, but because this is a budget, we have to try and predict early what we want to try and focus on. Some generator installations. That's pretty ironic. We have 2 buildings in the districts that do not have generators, so we're looking at those, and we have 2 buildings that the generators are really on their last legs. There's 4 that we're looking at, and we want to have some funds available to start to work on that. The chorus room ceiling in the high school, we need to just take a look up there with some of the HVAC work, perhaps redo the ceiling, again, early stages. A new entry ramp for Arbor. We did the new entrance doors at 5 of our locations, Arbor being one of them. And as a result of that work, we feel we need a new handicap accessible ramp at Arbor. Knollwood, water line replacement. We had 2 water leaks at Knollwood in the last month. And so we think that line is about 50 years old and is past its useful life. So we're looking to be proactive about replacing it now, since we know it is significantly damaged. And then various paving and concrete projects throughout the district.
What type of generators do we have? Natural gas or diesel?
Yeah, natural gas.
I was wondering what kind of renovations will be going on, like the high school.
That is mostly the seating. The actual room itself is in very good condition. It's 12, 14 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood. So there we're looking to upgrade. We're moving the, you're a clay person. What do you call the white thing at the back? Cyclorama, yes. We are upgrading, we're going to replace the cyclorama and move it forward, okay, so that you have more space behind there. We're upgrading the sound system, the lighting, going to LED lights, installing a new projector. So there it's a lot of technical stuff, some storage so that you can store some of the props and things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just to add a little bit to that, David's going over bullets here that isn't everything, but these are days and days and months of work for him and his people, so I want to give him credit for that.
And I have to say, I like the engagement of Zoe. Zoe, you're a senior, right?
Yeah.
So you'll be graduating, but you're
Yeah.
excited about that
Yes,
for the
so
future.
exciting.
You're engaged, and that's great.
Yeah.
I really like that enthusiasm. Thank you both for saying something, but it's wonderful.
Wireless microphones, all sorts of stuff.
Look at that.
I noted at the beginning, the DHS, the bleachers, light pole, and the storage under bleacher storage project, that's ongoing. So you'll see that work occurring. That'll go into the summer. We're expecting it to be ready for the start of the fall sports season. That was funded in the current year budget. So the budget you're looking at tonight for next year does not involve funds for that. We've already funded that project. Capital reserve, that's how we fund all these things. The fiscal planning committee has been very supportive for all the years I've been here, 5+ years now, about trying to deposit and put money into capital reserve. It's really one of the only mechanisms we have as a school district to save money. There's no emergency funds allowed for school districts. You're allowed at 2% of your budget for emergencies. And just to give you a comparison, townships and counties, they have no limitation. So you might have a township that has 10% of their budget saved for emergencies or projects. School districts are capped at 2% for emergencies, but we do have a little caveat that we're allowed to save money for capital projects and maintenance projects of our buildings. And the board has been very supportive over the years of those. Part of our budget for this year to fund all those capital projects you saw on the previous slide is we'll be taking $6.5 million from capital reserve to fund all of those things. Capital projects are not cheap, so it does take time to build up the money and be able to get these projects done.
But I just want to add that, David, if I could, that over the years through the business office, it's in identifying grants too, state grants and funding. It's called the School Development Authority. Before that, it was the New Jersey Development Authority. And that's where the money came from to revamp the auditorium like 12 years ago. And usually it's a 60-40 split. So if the district comes up with 60% of the money, the state will give you the other 40%. And it doesn't happen all the time. It takes the state legislature to put money aside and bond that money, and then school districts can apply for it. But if you look over that last, 15, 16-year period, Piscataway has taken advantage of it twice. And the first round was with the high school auditorium and others, and the second round was a lot of all the other projects that we keep reporting on. But so the district is proactive in taking care of state money like that.
Maintenance reserve is a smaller number, but that allows us to do maintenance projects. A lot of them end up being in-house. Sometimes we bid them out, smaller projects. So we've allocated some money for what I'm calling large painting projects. So painting gymnasiums, cafeterias, really big jobs. We have an in-house painter in the district who has been fantastic in painting our hallways. Almost all our hallways have been freshly painted over the last 4 years, and that's going great. But for the bigger projects, we'll bring somebody in to help with that, and some floor work as well. Some of the ongoing challenges that we have from year to year, supports and interventions for underperforming students, technology, we keep, there's no way to resist the push to technology, but it's not cheap. So we continue to try and find ways to fund the technology to deliver a 21st century education. Shortage of qualified teachers in certain content areas or with certain certifications for special education is always a challenge, and HR does a great job of trying to make sure we're always out there recruiting the best talent for the district. Having time and funding for professional development, particularly with technology, you can stick an iPad in front of somebody, but if you want to really implement it in the classroom, often you have to have the corresponding professional development. So we really try and invest in that. Comprehensive psychological support services for families. The superintendent has spoken about the Haven at the high school, and the district remains committed to that, but we're always looking for what else can we do. Okay. Housing projects, a demographer monitors those, we monitor them. I get notifications from the township, so we're always aware of developments that are occurring. The Avalon Bay development that went up next door to Eisenhower, we had great communication with the vice president from Avalon Bay, and he really kept us informed of their progress and when we might expect to start seeing students. And so we try to keep those positive relationships. And then lastly, facility upgrades and security. Often that's at the bottom of the peg for most school districts. All school districts focus on education first, but as I touched on before, we've done a great job here with a lot of board support in trying to save some money and get some capital projects done. So the budget comparison. So I'll just go over a few numbers here. The tax levy, you can see this is the current year's number, and this is what we're projecting or asking for next year, and there's your 2% increase. And that's for the general fund where we pay for all of our normal expenses. Debt service, the district has, again, for those on the fiscal committee, our auditors always report on this. We have an extremely low amount of debt, but we do still have a few more years worth of payment, so we have to raise money via the taxpayers for that, $3.6 million. You can see our total state and federal aid. Local revenue, I told you, was nearly $2 million. There's that number. Fund balance is money that we roll over from one budget year to the next. It's kind of excess funds from a previous budget year, and it helps us to support a future year's budget. And then transfers from reserve, those are the two numbers I spoke about a few slides ago, $6.5 million from capital reserve and $200,000 from the maintenance reserve. Okay? This is kind of how that money is allocated. The next slide gives you a little bit more, a little better description of it. So the general fund, when I say that, that means our normal daily operations, paying for teachers, paying for instruction, paying for equipment, paying for work we're doing to the buildings. And this is how we spend the money. Salaries are our biggest component. Okay? Salaries and benefits combined, I mentioned earlier, with the superintendent, it's about 70%, those two numbers combined, of our total budget. We're a very people-intensive business. Okay? Purchase professional services, those, that shows the investments that we're making in the building. A large portion of that number is, that's purchase property. Purchase professional services are what we pay our professionals, architects, auditors, any number of things in that realm. Part of that is synergistic, okay? A link between two account lines, the purchase professional services and utilities. You can see a decrease in utilities of $292,000. That's our projected decrease from all the energy efficiency programs we have going on. But there's a corresponding increase from the fees from Synergistic. So we monitor that. At a minimum, they have to achieve enough to pay for their fees, and then anything extra is savings for the district. Purchase property services, that reflects the maintenance projects that we do throughout the district, and you can see we've increased our investment in trying to maintain our buildings. Some of the other big ones, tuition is down, that's out of district tuition. We have so many great in-district programs for autistic children, for ED children, is that we really do a great job. Special Services does a great job of providing programs that meet the needs of our students in-house. The benefit of that is that we don't have to send them to other places. So you don't have to pay tuition to other schools, you don't have to pay for transportation. So next year, we're saving some money in out-of-district tuition because of all the number of kids that we're able to educate in-house with the programs that we have. Some other numbers here, equipment's down a little bit. That's really, we didn't need to invest in some buses this year, next year that we are investing in this year. Just fluctuates from year to year, nothing significant there. Capital outlay shows the increase that we're dedicating to some of the projects that were on that earlier slide. And charter schools. This number here we have no power over. We get this number from the state of New Jersey. There's numerous charter schools in the surrounding area. Children elect to go there. Based on the enrollment, the state comes and says, based on the enrollment of Piscataway resident children who go to these charter schools, you must give X dollars to these charter schools. It's been a big issue for Piscataway for many years. We continue to fight the fight, if you will. David one day can go on about some of the litigation we've been involved in just to make sure that Piscataway gets its fair share and that that law treats school districts, public school districts fairly and isn't skewed towards the charter schools. So that number increase this year, that's purely based on the projected enrollment for next year of charter school students.
David, just quickly on the previous slide, because it's a big number, on appropriations on the previous slide, what's an example down the bottom of a special revenue fund for it to $8 million?
Yeah, so those are, special revenue fund is money that's specifically designated for certain projects or certain programs, if you will, and can only be used on that. So the biggest example in that number is our preschool education aid. So we're slated to get about $3.5 million from the state of New Jersey for preschool funding for next year, and that would be the biggest component of that number.
Okay.
Some other numbers in there is our federal programs, our IDEA, our Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV programs. The key slide that most folks want to take a look at when we go through this presentation, what's it going to mean to the average homeowner? You can see the total tax levy. This is the amount for the general fund and for the debt service fund. You can see here, from last year to this year, the average assessed value for a homeowner went up about $13,000. Okay, that's the increase I was talking about earlier in ratables. So if you have if the assessed value of your home is around the average of $342,000, the school portion of your property tax bill is going to be $4,264.19. Okay, so you can kind of gauge accordingly if you know how the town assesses your house. If you're a little bit less, you'll pay a little bit less. If you're a little bit more, you'll pay a little more. So that means the increase for the average homeowner in their property taxes for school-related taxes is $65.96. So that's the increase from last year to this year.
Is it true, could I just ask a question? The township always publishes a newsletter, and now what they do on the very first page on the inside is put a pie chart. And they put 57% for school board. That $4,264.90 is about 57% of what you pay in taxes.
Yeah, correct. So that's not what your tax bill will be. If you're
Right.
an average homeowner, your tax bill will probably be about $9,000,
Right.
roughly. Because 4260 of it is for the school. No, excuse me, less than that. 4260 is for the school, so it'll probably be
Yeah.
around just under 8,000 maybe.
Right.
And the rest is going to the township and to the county. And if your house is 500,000, you can see here, down below here, for every $100,000 of assessed value of your house, that's how much taxes you would pay. So in a scenario, if your house is assessed at 500,000, you could take this number times 5, and that's how much your school property related tax bill would be. Just the calendar, where do we go from here? Tonight we're presenting the budget. There's a resolution on the agenda for approval. That approval merely authorizes me to submit the budget to the county, which is due on March 20th, a week from tomorrow. The county then reviews it. Perhaps they have a question or two, perhaps not. And the board then is entrusted with approving the budget on April 30th. There's a very strict timeline in statute in terms of when it has to be approved. It's typically the last couple days of April through the first week of May. So we have a board meeting scheduled for April 30th. We'll have a public hearing. Members of the public can speak on the budget, and final budget adoption is that night. And by the very next day, within 48 hours, we have to have what's called a user-friendly budget. It's a condensed version of the full budget is 110 pages when I download it as a PDF. So they condensed the user-friendly version to a much shorter document, and that's posted on our district website. So that's it. We have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
So what was missing you leave, huh? Thank you, David. And that concludes my report, Madam President.
Thank you, Superintendent. And thank you, David. Personnel, number 9, Personnel and Labor Relations. Mr. Laughlin.
Be it resolved that the following motions identified as items A through H be approved as presented.
Second?
Yep.
Do I have any discussion? No discussion.
I'll take the roll. Dr. Connors?
Yes.
Mr. Fields?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Laughlin?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Cattell?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Motion's carried.
And number 10, committee reports.
I'll just quickly go on the Fiscal Plannings and Operations Committee. We met last Wednesday, March 4th, and you just saw a lot of what we discussed at the Fiscal Plannings and Operations Committee meeting. We discussed the 2020-21 budget, and then the business office prepared the presentation that you just saw. And state aid. State aid is something that Piscataway is not getting its fair share of, as you saw from the presentation, for many years. But we're now on a timetable due to the S2 legislation where Piscataway, who has been historically underfunded, is on a 6-year schedule where the districts around the state that are overfunded by this formula are getting cuts, and we are getting increases. So eventually, in time, as David had said, 4 years from now, we should be back to our 27 million total, but we'll be getting increases each year if they keep, the legislature keeps passing the budget. Capital projects happen because of the great job that the business office is doing in terms of keeping track each year through the audit of the money that goes, and then we can appropriate it, and you saw all the examples that what we're doing. But something that's important is to think about 5 years down the road. And so what David's doing and the district's doing and David's business office heading up is doing a 5-year plan. So you go out to the facilities and things that you haven't been able to do in the past. Example might be, hopefully it'll make it to this 5-year capital plan. One great example is that what often is not, when you go out to the schools and make observations, one thing that David pointed out wasn't seen. Look in this room and see the blinds, how nice they are and how great they are. It turns out throughout the school district and many of the buildings, they're in terrible shape. And one of our, goals is to provide a nice climate and culture. And so if you're in a classroom and the sun's constantly coming through on your desk, or the teacher can't fix the blind, that's a bad thing. Or if it's constantly broken, it's constantly dark in there. So that's one of the examples of something to put into the 5-year plan, is to replace all the blinds in all the school system. One of the other benefits might be, we discussed in the committee, for safety and security. If there was like a lockdown or something, then you'd be able to close the blinds. So anyway, that's a good example of one of the types of things. The energy audit too, you're constantly looking for ways to figure out how much energy you are spending and then trying to make improvements. This particular local government energy audit is one that is, it's called, what's that called again, ESIPs or something, Energy Savings Improvement Program, and you work with the government and then you identify projects. That one there is an example would be, and I didn't even know we had them up there, on top of all of the roofs are a lot of your HVAC units and so on. Well, you need lighting to shine on those. And if you replace that with LED lighting, there's a huge savings. So that's another example. The maintenance projects, I think this was great. In the time that I've been on the board, I've seen an incredible improvement in the schools constantly being painted. And I'll get Grandview. I was in Grandview the other day and I couldn't believe. So you go to school, as a young student, and you come in. Isn't it great to see how bright the walls are nice and painted? That's what a lot of the projects are like this, and carpeting and things like that. And then the last thing is, hey, you got to feed everybody. Last thing is food services, and food services is a big expense, and there's lots of regulations. But we're working with in that particular area. So our next meeting is Wednesday, April 1st.